Hi, I'm Dr. Rich Blana, and welcome to the Conquer Your Stress training program. In this introductory course, training session 1, I'm going to introduce you to my definition of stress. And it's really, really important from the very beginning that we're on the same page when it comes to how we view stress and how we view coping with stress. So that's really what this training session focuses on. And if you remember from the welcome video, the way the training is going to work is you're going to be doing exercises. I'm going to ask you to stop the video and to actually do an exercise or an activity using the paper and pencil version. And I really believe that this hands-on training, when you actually stop and do an activity along with me, is the key to really learning how to conquer your stress. So if you haven't done it already, as soon as I reduce the picture of myself, I'd like you to stop the video and to actually print off the exercises that are associated with training session 1. And they're going to be located in the PDF file that says introductory course exercises for training session 1. All right, so just relax, and everything you need is on this video and in those exercises. And hopefully by the end of this training session, we'll be on the same page in terms of what is stress and coping. So I'm going to reduce myself now and then go to the PowerPoints. Okay. All right, so as you see on the screen, we're the introductory course training session 1. And what I'd like to do in this training session is help you discover a new way of defining stress and look at the key, the 3 components of stress, because understanding those 3 components of stress is going to set you up for understanding how to cope with stress and how to conquer your stress. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the short and long-term effects of stress. So I'd like you to stop the video right now and do exercise 1, what is stress? And I'm going to actually do it along with you, even though it's pretty self-explanatory. And this exercise, as I said, is in the introductory course exercises PDF handout. All right, so what is stress? What I'd like you to do is finish the following 3 sentences by writing your answers down on a piece of paper. And I don't really care how bizarre you think your answers are, just finish the sentence with the first thing that comes to your head. So for example, when I say stress is, for me, I would finish that sentence, stress is children. Stress is unanticipated technology glitches. Stress is a bill that I really wasn't prepared for. All right, so take a moment and finish that sentence then. All right, good. Now let's jump to the second one. What's going on in your head when you're confronted with that stressor? So stress is. So when I am stressed, I tell myself what? So for example, when I'm confronted with a technological problem, I usually say to myself, oh, Rich, you're too old for this stuff. This technology changes so fast, you'll never be able to keep up with it. You should just give it up. So that's what I mean. When I am stressed, I tell myself, what does your mind tell you about the things that you identified in the first sentence, whether it's kids, bills, taxes, or technology? So take a moment and answer the question. When I am stressed, I tell myself. Okay, good. And then the third sentence, when I am stressed, I feel. So what's going on in your body and your mind when you're confronted with a stressor and your mind starts telling you things that aren't necessarily helpful? I know when I'm stressed, I feel this tension in my neck and my upper shoulders, a big thick muscle called the trapezius muscle that actually connects my upper back to my neck. That just gets tight and painful. And I also feel anxiety. I'm prone to episodes of anxiety, so when I'm really stressed out, I tend to feel very anxious. So when you're stressed, you feel what? What's going on in your body and in your mind? And if you need to, pause the video right now and finish those sentences because I think I might have rushed you along a little bit. Okay, good. All right, so what you've learned or what we've discovered so far is that stress is really a combination of three things. That first sentence, stress is, really refers to what I call potential stressors, things that are out there that are not yet stressors, but they have the potential to stress you out. And then the second sentence then, when we started asking, looking at what is your mind telling you when you're confronted with those potential stressors, that's the second part of what stress is, what your mind tells you about those potential stressors. And then the third part of what is stress is a response that kicks in. So let's go over these three components of stress in a little more detail. Potential stressor, what your mind tells you about the potential stressor, and then the response. All right, potential stressors could be anything. And here's just a smattering of some common potential stressors. If you're younger or even if you're midlife, maybe your future and your career are things that, are still potentially stressful because you haven't worked them out. Maybe money issues, savings and bills are potential stressors because, again, maybe your financial situation isn't too strong. So anything can be a potential stressor. Now, really what makes a potential stressor is anything that you view as either threatening or something that has already caused you harm or loss. So a potential stressor is something that is viewed by you as either threatening or has already caused you harm or loss. And a stressor is really only a potential stressor until you connect it with some form of threat, harm, or loss that you can't cope with. Let me show you how this works. Well, first, before we do that, let's talk a little bit about what threat is. Threat is really something that hasn't happened yet. So we could use a letter from your insurance company describing a possible rate increase as something that's a potential threat. Right? You get this letter, it's from your insurance company, and if you're like me, anytime you see anything that's coming from your insurance company, or your health insurance in particular, it's like, oh God, what's going on? What problem is this going to bring? So you get this letter from your insurance company. It says, we're probably going to raise your auto insurance rates by anywhere from 20 to 50%, right? So that's threatening. It hasn't happened yet, but the letter's saying it might happen. Now, harm or loss involves something that's already happened and hurt you in some way. So let's use the same example of your insurance company. Your auto insurance company sends you a letter and they say, we increase rates by 30%. You'll see it reflected in next month's bill. So that's something that's already happened, and it has inflicted harm or loss because you weren't expecting a rate increase and you don't really have the money to pay for it. So threat is saying we're going to raise it. Harm or loss is we've already done this. Now, what your mind tells you about the potential stressor, especially about the answers to two questions, is it a threat, harm, or a loss? And can I cope, actually determines whether or not that potential stressor becomes an actual stressor and triggers a stress response. So let me back up. It isn't really the potential stressor that's the issue. It's what your mind tells you about it that actually makes it become a real stressor and trigger the stress response. And let me give you some examples. And maybe we'll go over this. Now, both of these questions are answered simultaneously in your mind. Your mind just looks at both of them and boom, boom, it makes a real quick determination and answers the questions. And it happens so fast that in most instances, you don't even realize that your mind has answered those two questions. Okay, so let's look at threat, harm, and loss and coping, and let's look at the answers to these questions. So again, you get a letter from your insurance company that says we have raised rates by 20%. And you look at it, and if you're in a position where you kind of saw it coming down the pike and you've got money put in your savings account already to anticipate that, it's really not threatening. and it really didn't involve any harm or loss. And you tell yourself, yes, I can cope with that. So if there's no threat, harm, or loss, and you say, yes, I can cope with it, there's no stress. It just comes and goes. It's like any one of 1,000 things that enter your consciousness in any day that don't turn out to be stressful. If you get the same letter saying your rates have gone up by 20% and you say, wow, that's, that is both threatening and it really involves me losing an extra, $70 this month in my checking account. So yes, that was harmful and a loss to me. But you know what? I still can cope with it. I still have enough excess money in my cash flow that it really is something I can cope with. So in this case, even though it involved harm and loss, you still are saying, yes, I can cope with it. So therefore, your mind does not trigger a stress response. And again, like one of 1,000 things you're exposed to in any given day, it just goes in one ear and out the other. You write the check and you go on your way. Now, if you're like most people, when you got that letter and it said, oh my gosh, your rates went up 20, 30%, yeah, you felt that that was harmful and you now lost, $75 or more in that month's cash flow. And no, you can't cope with that. You had that money put aside for something else. So in the combination, the answers to those questions are, yes, it was a threat, harm, or loss, and no, I can't cope with that. What happens is your mind instantly sends a message that, uh-oh, this is a threat, and I can't cope, and boom, it triggers a stress response. So once your mind says that, this is a threat and I can't cope, it automatically triggers a chain of events in your brain that are controlled by your nerves and your hormones. So both your nervous system and your endocrine systems get involved that trigger this response. And these systems, they send nerve messages and hormonal messages through your bloodstream throughout your body that initiate the stress response. And what the stress response is really all about, it's a response that mobilizes energy to fight or flee. Now, if you remember that little picture of the rhinoceros and the person running from it, that's a perfect example. If you're, on the savannah hiking and all of a sudden a rhinoceros comes out, from behind a tree, it's instantly a threat and your body's got to either fight it or get the heck out of there. And this is a primitive response. I mean, this response has been with us since our, cavemen and cavewomen first stalked the earth. Just imagining if you were a caveman or a cavewoman and you had your sharpened stick, because it's, before the metal age, and you had your sharpened stick and you're tracking some dinner on the savannah, and you're following these tracks, and these tracks take you around this big boulder, and crouched behind this big boulder is a saber-toothed tiger with its teeth bared, ready to pounce on you. Well, way back when we were on the savannah, our bodies had the ability to mobilize energy to fight or flee. So instantly in our brain, what happened was, it said, holy smokes, this is a threat, and I got to either fight it or get out of here. I can't cope with this by standing here. So your body mobilizes all this energy, and you either stab the saber-toothed tiger and kill it, right, fight, or you turn tail and run, flee. So this response has been with us since the dawn of civilization, and you probably don't even realize that the fight or flight response has already saved your lives several times over. Now this is what the actual response looks like. It's pretty complex, and you can see that various body parts get involved. I mean, you have your digestive system and the whole process of, creating saliva to digest foods. Well, that shuts down because your digestive system shuts down. Your stomach is not really in the process of wanting to digest food at this point because you're trying to fight or flee. So all of the things involved in digestion kind of slow down. And what happens is your muscles contract, your blood vessels dilate, your eyes really focus, your lungs start to take in huge amounts of oxygen, and you start to produce a sweating effect to keep you cool, and your heart pumps that oxygenated blood throughout your body. So you're mobilizing energy to fight or flee. Now, unless you either remove the stressor or cope with it successfully, what happens is your brain's going to run you through your body from this initial intense immobilization of energy and alarm response all the way through exhaustion. So unless you get rid of that stressor or cope with it successfully, your body will take you from alarm to exhaustion. Now, in the short term, if you get rid of the stress, you either cope with it effectively, what will happen is the end result of a short-term acute stressor that you've either removed or coped with, it'll just leave you tired. You know, mobilizing all that energy to fight or flee, even if you succeed in it, takes a lot of energy. So, you know, your body's mobilized all these hormones and sugars, and your muscles are tense, and your heart rate's increasing. So once that response is over, you're going to be tired, and, you know, with a normal amount of sleep, you should bounce back and be your normal self the next day. However, if you have chronic stress, ongoing stress, and you don't either remove it or cope with it successfully, the long-term effects will wear you out. They'll wear you down, they'll use up all your available energy, and they'll reduce the quality of your life. I mean, you'll start to see signs like you'll just be irritable, you'll be tense, you won't be able to relax, and all of those daily, diminished quality of life symptoms will be there. And essentially what happens with day in, day out chronic stress is that it runs your immune system down, and it increases your risk of both physical and mental illness. So what I'd like you to do is get a handle on your stress response right now, and I'd like you to stop the video again and take a little time, because this exercise is not something that I'm going to go through with you right now, but it actually measures the effects of stress right now in your life. So stop the video, go to the introductory course exercises, and do exercise 2, the effects of stress, and it will give you a good look at your own personal stress response. Okay, welcome back. So hopefully you've gotten a handle on your own stress response, and you can start to see, how your body and mind react to stress and how you feel at this point in your life in terms of the stress response. Because we're all unique. What's really, really interesting about stress, and I'm going to try and take us back to my picture here. All right. What's really interesting about stress is that while we all mobilize this tremendous amount of energy to fight or flee, and the things that go on beneath the surface, with hormonal release and nerve transmissions and increased blood pressure and all that stuff that's associated with stress, while all that's the same for us, the way it shows up at the surface is very, very different. You might respond mostly with symptoms in your muscular system, so you'll feel tense, or you might respond mostly with emotional symptoms and feel anxious or worry excessively, or you may respond mostly with your endocrine system and have things like missed menstrual cycles and blotchy skin and things like that. So we all respond differently, and the way we notice that our quality of life is changing due to stress is different. So that's why it's really important for you to, take that stress symptom exercise 2, and take a look at it. And you're going to see that by the end of this introductory course, I'm going to talk to you about journaling and why it's important to kind of keep track of your personal stress responses, because we're all so different. So where does that bring us? Well, to conquer your stress, you really need a program that addresses all 3 components of stress: potential stressors, what your mind tells you about them, and your own individual stress response. And that's what we're going to discuss in the rest of the introductory course. is why the Conquering Your Stress program is going to work for you where others don't work, because other programs don't address all three components of stress. So I hope as a result of this training session, you come away understanding what stress is. Stress is really a combination of three things: potential stressors, which could be anything, what your mind tells you about them, and in particular about the threat, harm, or loss associated with them, and your ability or inability to cope with that. And then what happens in your body and mind once it triggers a stress response. So I hope you enjoyed this training session, and I'm looking forward to working with you in the future training sessions. So give me a moment, and I'm going to stop the video, and we'll be done.